And our mission is to provide education and advance organic agriculture food systems in the state of Iowa. Our members represent a diverse community of Iowa's organic farmers, food and farm businesses, and advocates of organic consumers, anyone that wants to champion the movement. And you guys are part of that, so thank you. As far as the overarching priorities, here they are. We have education, outreach, advocacy, and community. Those are kind of our biggest ones. I would say education is probably the biggest one, with various programs that we've done over the years to include growing organic expertise with technical service providers. Actually, really exciting. We've received this grant with NRCS, and we've done a first of a kind training to NRCS staff last December. Mostly district conservationists across the state. And we partnered for that grant with Organic Agronomy Training Services, OATS, and they actually deliver the information. So the first session was a full day long session, and we discussed things like tillage and weed control. And then the exciting part is that we'll keep meeting with this group for the next 4 years to kind of develop on the organic topics. And the last year when we'll meet with NRCS, we'll kind of have an overview of everything we deliver to them to kind of a refresher on all the information. The other thing that we've done for the last couple of years, we've partnered with REAP-SEP, Resource Enhancement Conservation Education Program through our Department of Natural Resources. And we've gone to various colleges across the state of Iowa, 17 colleges, 3 of which were repeats. In those colleges, we've delivered lectures on organic ag, the National Organic Program, kind of like an overview of the history of the organic movement. I did that part at the beginning of the lecture. And then at the end of the lecture, I would have an organic farmer in that area, whatever the college is based out of, share their story. Why did they decide to become organic? The struggles, the good things, everything in between. So in the fall, we've met with the students via a classroom lecture, and in the spring, whenever possible, if logistically possible for the college, we actually invited the students to join and actually go to that organic farmer's farm that they heard from the fall semester. So it's been really fun to see these students learn more. 93% of the students last semester reported gaining additional knowledge from our lectures, and 94% rated our lectures either good or excellent. So we've received really great feedback. Most of the students definitely resonate with the farmer because they love hearing the hands-on experience. Other education programming, of course, this workshop is part of it. We also conduct various webinars throughout the winter months. And then as far as outreach, we always try to stay at the forefront and meet our stakeholders via conferences. We were part of Practical Farmers of Iowa, part of Marble Seed, part of O'Grain, various trade shows, etc. And we usually try to list those on our website under the calendar page. So if you are ever interested to see what's happening in our realm, you can check that out. As far as advocacy, we try to advance state level leadership policies dedicated to funding that supports Iowa's organic movement. We've met with Secretary Naig a couple of years ago and proposed a few things, including assistance to farmers that are looking to transition within those first 3 years of transition, which we currently don't have in the state, but there are some states in the Midwest like Minnesota, and I want to say North Dakota, don't quote me on that, I might be wrong, but Minnesota, North Dakota that do offer assistance in those transition years. In addition, we have been selected by this top funding. Is transition, it's stands for something, always Transitioning Organic Partnership Program. Thank you, Katie. So this is a really exciting funding that it's about $300 million, and $100 million is divided towards educating farmers, creating mentorship programs, and also providing farmers with technical service providers so that when they are transitioning, they have additional support that they can rely on. So we, Iowa Organic Association, have been selected as leading organization in for the Midwest region. So it's kind of divided in 6 regions across the country. So that's really exciting. So for those of you farmers that are transitioning or need help, definitely be sure to check in with us on these mentorship relationships. The program is still in the development stages, but we, like I said, we are a leading partner. So definitely let us know if you're interested to participate. And then, of course, community, building a community of organic farmers that have done it, that have the experience to share with others. That's what we're about. And, our board of directors is a great example. There's, 12 of them, and about half of them are organic farmers. So while, you may have a question for us that we may not answer right away, we have the resources to tap into and kind of check in with others. So always feel free to connect and ask questions. We'll try to find the answer and provide with assistance. And then as far as resources that we personally develop in-house, the Iowa Organic Resource Directory, pictured here, you can actually access this document via PDF format on our website under the resources link. I actually brought some paper copies with me today, but it's a great tool. It has over 900 businesses, nonprofits, educators, service providers listed in the directory, seed dealers, and anyone and everyone that you may need to get in touch with for your operation. And we believe it serves as a valuable tool for the organic community to achieve growth and continued success. So this workshop, including all of our winter webinars that we've done for the past few months, is actually in part funded by a grant that we've received from Risk Management Agency, RMA, through United States Department of Agriculture. And I just want to highlight a few programs that are of benefit to you guys. So we have the Whole Farm Revenue Program. It provides a risk management safety net for all commodities on a farm under one insurance policy for kind of larger operations that have up to $17 million of insured revenue. Great policy. The other one that's kind of similar to the Whole Farm Revenue, but a smaller operation, is called the Micro Farm Program, up to $350,000 in approved revenue. And finally, the Transitional and Organic Grower Assistance Program, TOGA, is a program for agricultural producers who have crop insurance coverage on crops in transition to organic or certified organic crops. So those of you that are transitioning, this is a great option for you. And what I want to share, since we are recording this, and we'll be posting this on our YouTube channel. Under the description of the recording, you will find links to each one of these programs. So if you want to research further and dig deeper, they'll be available to you at ease. And then obviously, as a small nonprofit, we rely heavily on your membership. Your support means the world. If you're not already a member, please consider becoming one. Of course, if you have a business and you'd like to be a sponsor, inquire with either myself or Roz, and we can, get you some answers on that. Dustin, I see you here in the picture. So this is all I have for you guys. Thank you for listening to me. And I'll go ahead and yield the floor to Jamey. Okay. So let me open the presentation. So this is the first one, correct?
Yep.
And then I need to save it. Sorry, guys, we'll just we're working out the kinks here. Well, maybe. Okay, so let's see. It's not letting me go on Zoom. So I think I need to save the file. And just save it. All right. All right, guys, thank you for your patience there. Okay, so Jamie basically just kind of arrow.
Okay.
Yep. All right, thank you. You bet. Mhm.
Okay, thank you, Olga, for the nice introduction and opening there. My name is Jamey Meyer, and my title is Ag Compliance Investigator, which is also known as the Organic Inspector for the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship. We go by IDALS. And I've done this job since 2013, so going into 10 years. And it's a combination of doing organic inspections and organic file review. And I've enjoyed every minute of it. So I'm going to talk about some of the basics of organic certification and get into some of the big regulations. And then I'm going to talk about different record keeping requirements of organic certification and go over some examples of organic system plans. So those of you on Zoom, if you have a question, if you could just hold it until the end, I'm happy to answer them. Looks like we've got a big turnout today, so don't all talk at once. So this is a little bit about the National Organic Program. The NOP is the acronym for National Organic Program, and it is housed under the Agricultural Marketing Service, which is a branch of the United States Department of Agriculture. And the NOP establishes and enforces the organic regulations. The federal regulations went into effect in April of 2002. However, you do still hear stories of people being certified as early as 2000 or the 90s. And that is true. They were certified, just not under the federal regulations. So prior to the federal regulations coming in effect, you had different co-ops, different organizations that would pop up throughout the state and the country. There used to be Organic Growers and Buyers Association, OGBA, I believe the title was. And they kind of had their own take on what organic meant. You'd also have different co-ops that would form and try to pool to get growers together and try to market their products that way. The Iowa Department of Agriculture actually began certifying farming operations as early as the year 2000. And prior to 2002, there was a lot of different talk about what organic meant and what it was. And at that time, in the early days, the states actually started developing some of their own rules and regulations. And then in 2002, became a federal program, and the feds came in, and you basically had to get in or get out. So now there is only one organization that regulates organic. And IDALS, again, stands for the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship. And we are an accredited certifying agency. It's one of the many things we do at the department. So here is a slide about the organic stakeholder community. At the top, you've got the National Organic Program, which establishes and enforces the organic regulations. We've also got the National Organic Standards Board, and that is a 15-member council. It's a voluntary council that serves 5-year terms, and they don't really set the regulations, but they help guide the NOP through different policy situations. They get into some discussion regarding which products should not be allowed. But again, that's just a 15-member organization on a 5-year term. And then you've got the National Organic Program at the top. And what they do is they accredit certifying agents. So it's a federal program, but for the most part, the feds aren't going to come to your farm. I'm not going to say they never will, but they oversee the certifying agents. Certifying agents are a mix between state government agencies and public and private, for-profit and not-for-profit businesses. So those certifying agents actually certify the organic operation. So the certifying agents are going to develop the organic system plans, review files, review OSPs, and the certifying agents are going to carry out the inspections. I can tell you at the Iowa Department of Ag, since we are a certifying agent, we are kind of overseen by the NOP, and we get audited as well about every 2 years. And a group of auditors comes, I guess they live all across the country. They used to all be in DC, but they'll come to the Walls building for a week and basically audit every record that we have. And they pick certain operations which they may want to go see, and we would have to take them on an inspection. So it is a pretty tight program. And the certifying agents are going to certify the operations. And then at the bottom, you've got the retailers and consumers, the folks that actually buy the organic products. So the first thing you want to do if you want to become organic is to find a certifier. And this is a website that is run and maintained by the NOP, and it is called the Organic Integrity Database, also known as OID. And it's a really helpful tool. What it's going to do is show every organic operation that is certified under the USDA standards. And it will also list every certifying agency. So you'll want to go on here and locate a certifier. There's also a drop-down menu in the advanced search where you can search specific cities, I think even counties, and see what certifiers are operating in your area. So this is my kind of one and only plug about the IDALS organic program. We are an accredited certifier, but we are not the only certifier that operates in the state. We currently certify about 350 operations under the scopes of crop, livestock, and processing. There is a fourth scope called wild crops, which we do not do. And we are staffed with 2 full-time file reviewers, 2 full-time employees that do file reviews and inspections, 1 program manager who is responsible for ultimately making final certification decision. And then on any given year, we utilize up to 10 to 12 contract inspectors just to get this job done. Part of the regulations say that the organic inspection needs to occur at a time when activities are taking place. So right now in February, there's not a lot of activities taking place on farms. So we are not doing inspections right now. Probably June through October is our biggest window where it's really crunch time to get to every farm and get an inspection done. And that would just be too much for 1 or 2 people. The benefit of having 10 to 12 contractors helping us out is that we can really cover the state in a uniform manner and get inspections done rather quickly. And like I said, we are not the only certifier that operates in Iowa, although we are the only state agency. So the other certifiers would be a mix between private businesses. And here is a list of just a few of some of the others. I think there's up to 18 different certifiers now that are operating in the state. So if you look at the top, CCOF, certification services, they are actually based out of California, but they will come to Iowa and other states in the Midwest and certify operations. EcoCert, Global Organic Alliance, ICS, I think they're out of North Dakota. Minnesota Crop Improvement is in Minnesota. MOSA, they're in Wisconsin. They're one of the larger ones. So the list goes on. You can kind of decide who you want to work with. You know, I've heard different shop talk through the years of why folks choose a certain certifier over another. Just kind of depends on what your preferences are. But regardless who you work with, the regulations are going to be the same. So all certifiers are going to follow the organic regulations, which is in the federal code. CFR Part 205 is where the National Organic Program is. So you can go online and find it, or you can print it off. If you do print it off, it's probably a good 1/4 inch thick. It's a big stack of papers, which can be intimidating for a lot of folks. But it's going to cover everything from crop production down to livestock and processing. So it is going to outline all of the rules. So again, online or a paper copy works. So now I'm going to get into just some of the bigger regulations. We don't have time today to go through every single one, but I'm going to touch on some of the big ones. So the first one is in 205-100, what has to be certified. And it reads as follows: except for operations exempt or excluded in 205-101, each production or handling operation or specified portion of a production or handling operation that produces or handles crops, livestock products, or other agricultural products that are intended to be sold or labeled as organic must be certified under the provisions of this part. So if you are producing crops, you need to be certified. If you're producing livestock, you need to be certified, or if you're doing any sort of handling, you would need to become certified. There are some exemptions and exclusions to being certified. The first exemption is if you have sales of $5,000 or less. Second one is a handling operation that handle products containing less than 70% organic ingredients, and handling operations that do not process or repackage the organic product. If you are exempt or excluded, you must also comply with the organic standards. And if you choose to file for the exemption, you do not have an organic inspection. However, your crop cannot be used in processed products. So an important takeaway here is just because you gross less than $5,000, you may qualify for the exemption, but you don't necessarily have to take it. You could apply for the actual organic certification. One place where the exemptions really take place, it's like smaller growers that might just grow, fruits and vegetables and sell at a table at the farmer's market. The last bullet is a big one. Crop cannot be used in processed products. So if you have a field of corn or soybeans, that could not be used to process into chicken feed. Or if you're growing organic strawberries and you file for the exemption, you couldn't go to a processor and have your strawberries made into strawberry jam. So just because you qualify for the exemption does not mean you have to necessarily take it.
Sure.
Oh, that's fine.
I wanted to remove this bar.
Oh, that'd be great.
If I can. Okay. Yeah, okay. That's fine. We'll go ahead. Sorry about that, guys. Messing things up. Oh no. Am I going back right here?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay. Oh, there.
Oh, you got it.
There.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so if you gross less than $5,000, you may qualify, but you also may want to actually get certified depending on how you plan to market your crops. And the excluded handler is a portion of the regulation that they're currently rewriting with the new SOE regulations. It used to be, anybody that didn't handle products. So if you would get, say, organic seed that was in a bag and sealed, and as long as you didn't open that bag, you could operate as an excluded handler and take that bag and sell it on to different growers. They are changing that and trying to get everybody in the pipeline certified from all these different brokers and avenues that were uncertified in the past. So land requirements in 205-202, this is another big one. There is a 3-year transition period from the last application of a prohibited substance. So what is a prohibited substance? It's anything that would not be allowed in organic. Now, as you drive throughout the state, almost all of these fields that you see would not qualify for organic. And that's because prohibited substances are applied. It could be a synthetic fertilizer, like the big anhydrous tanks you see, that would be a prohibited substance. Urea, seed treatments is a big one. Most of the conventional crops are grown with treated seeds. Those would all be prohibited. So you actually need a 3-year transition from whenever the last prohibited substance was applied. And in this example, we've got June 1st of 2020, prohibited substance was applied. So this field would be eligible after June 1st of 2023. So what's important here is in that 3rd year, in the early spring, you're going to locate your certifier and actually apply for the certification agency. You can go ahead and plant that crop before that June 1st deadline, you just can't harvest it beforehand. So if you look at the, the corn and bean example, which is what we see a lot of here in the state, you're going to apply to your certifier now, like in February or March. You probably plant that corn in May or early June. Go ahead and do your cultivation work and whatnot. And as long as you harvest that crop after June 1st, you are okay. There's also different land requirements needed for organic certification. Organic fields are required to have defined distinct boundaries and buffer zones. The boundary between your organic farm and the non-organic field should be something that's easily observable. So in this example, we've got a nice picket fence with a big grass strip. It looks like it's 40 or 50 feet wide. That's a pretty good buffer. So you've always got the option to just leave a grass strip or a fence line. The organic regulations don't specify how wide your buffer needs to be. It just says that it has to keep out prohibited substances. Now, I know in some areas of the state, actually any area of the state now, land is really valuable, and it may not make sense for farmers to plant a wide 50-foot grass strip. So another option that people do is just plant fence line to fence line. So you would plant your organic crop directly next to a conventional crop's fence line, and you would harvest your buffer strip, usually somewhere in the range of 30 to 50 feet. And your harvested buffer would be sold on the conventional market. And you would have to document the amounts, the harvest dates, etc. So the buffer area itself could not be sold as organic. Go ahead.
So the downside of doing that is that you have to clean all of your equipment.
Correct. Yeah, the downside of this is it's a little more record keeping. You would have to document your cleanouts and then the total area harvested from the buffer. So it is something that happens that we see. It's just a little more record keeping involved. Chemical drift, it's an unfortunate thing to talk about, but it does occur here in Iowa. I think 99% of the crops grown in the state are conventionally grown, and prohibited products would be used on them. So the regulation says that drift must be reported to the certifier. I think it's in 205-400 that states that. So whatever certifier you work with, you're going to report the drift to if it happens. We also recommend that you report the drift to the IDALS Pesticide Bureau. So again, we're both IDALS in this situation, but we do two different functions. The organic program is going to go out and take photographs, possibly samples, and see if drift entered your organic farm. And if it had, there's a chance that we would need to take that field out of production. Now, the Pesticide Bureau, they're going to have a different function. They are going to go out and do their own investigation, talking to neighboring farmers, talking to chemical applicators, and they're going to see if a chemical was misapplied. If it was applied on a day that was too windy or off-label use, that kind of thing. So it is important to report drift to both cases if it happens. And fields occurring chemical drift must go through a 3-year transition again. We try not to take out the whole field if we can help it. If we are able to test or visually observe where the drift occurred, there may be a possibility to create new buffer areas and not take out the whole thing. We had an instance a few years ago that a sprayer actually went into our organic grower's field, and he was in the wrong field. He didn't know it. And he was able to print off with his GPS coordinates a track of exactly where he went. So then the organic farmer was able to take out, 20 acres instead of the whole 80-acre chunk. So those are handled kind of on a case-by-case basis. But the main takeaway is you need to keep organic or prohibited substances off your farm.
Question: what are the current ramifications to the person that is drifting on an organic?
So our question was, what are the current ramifications for the person that drifted on an organic farm? And we don't get into that a whole lot. I think there are lawsuits and different litigation that take place, but from the organic program, we don't get involved. All we would do is possibly take a field out of certification, and then you would have our report or our samples that say, hey, this field's coming out for 3 years, and it would be up to that farmer to pursue civil litigation against who did it. That's a good question.
Jamie, I also have a question.
Sure.
So in the instance that we are looking at a pesticide for insects or seeds, and the producer is unaware that this has occurred, and then we have one of the inspectors go out and they notice it, is there going to be reporting it, or how do we look at that?
That is another good question. Can they hear that, or should I repeat it?
Repeat it.
Okay. So we had another question about what if the drifted product is an insecticide or something that's not observably easily seen, and the department comes out and takes testing and finds it, and the grower didn't actually report it. That's a good question, and basically drift needs to be reported if it's noticed. You know, if you did receive some drift and you had no idea it was there, I don't feel you'd be at fault. We do our own sampling kind of routinely, which I'll go into a little bit. But I think the main thing is if you see it, you've got to report it. If you don't know about it or you don't see signs, you're not really at fault for that.
Is there like, with the other USDA, there's like a time frame, like 15 days from the day it occurred?
So the question was, is there a timeline of when it has to be reported? And it's not specified in the regulation. The term immediately is used. So I think it's kind of as soon as you see it. Prior to this year, I was the only inspector on staff. And if we got a drift call, I would drop what I was doing or cancel what I was doing and try to get there within a day or two, because we always feel like we owe it to that producer and to the consumers to get out there and sample and do the right thing. We have another question.
Well, assuming the worst chances for drift is going to be aerial applications of insecticide and fungicide. Is there any kind of registry or anything for
Another great question.
farms to where some of the bigger aerial outfits can see it, kind of be a red flag to them that they, or just posting signs around your properties as good as it's gonna be?
There was a question about if there's a registry that you can kind of identify your organic land. And there is a registry. It's called the IDALS Sensitive Crops Registry. Well, it used to be called that. Now it's called Drift Watch, and all the neighboring states are on there. So you can go into this Drift Watch program, and it's a really good website. It's an interactive map where you can look at your fields, and you just kind of click and drag where all of your organic fields are, or where all of your beehives are, or sensitive crops. And that's going to notify all the aerial applicators or ground applicators in your area that, hey, these crops are sensitive for this reason.
Okay, what's the name of that again?
It's called Drift Watch, and it's on the department website if you want to look into it. It's free to use. You've got to create a username and password, and then you can update your information every year. The one thing I will mention with Drift Watch is it's not a no-fly zone, and we do get calls sometime, hey, I'm on this Drift Watch, and I just had a spray plane buzz by me, and there's nothing we can do. But basically, as an organic farmer, you need to do whatever it is in your power to prevent drift. And if that means getting on the Drift Watch website, that's a good start. You could also post roadside signs that says your field's organic.
And we sell those signs on our
Yeah.
website.
You sell yellow ones?
Not the exact same
Okay.
kind, but we do have.
Yeah,
similar.
any sign will work. I think we sell signs too, or we used to. You don't have to use our signs. And then talk to your neighbors is a good one. I've investigated drift cases before, and no one knew the guy was organic. And I feel like some of those problems can be avoided. That maybe your neighbor would watch the wind speed or the wind direction a little bit more. Had he known you were certified. Talk to your county as well. Some counties that have a lot of organic farmers, they'll have their own registry where farmers will go in every year and update their information. And then the county would know not to come in and spray the road ditches along organic fields, because that does occur too.
The applicators are required for commercial applicators.
Yeah, commercial applicators, as far as I know, they are required to document things like wind speed and look at that. And then different. I don't know about that, but they should. And then different products are going to have different requirements of, you can't spray it with this high of wind or this amount of heat.
These even private sprayers that who are obtaining like, they have to do it certified annually and they
Yeah.
have to meet those same requirements. So whether they hire somebody or they're doing it
Mhm.
themselves, should be.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's a great tool. It may not prevent drift 100%, but it's a really good step in the right direction. Any more questions on drift? Okay, this is another big component of the regulation. It is the crop rotation requirements. And the crop rotation requirements state that your crop rotation must include, but not be limited to sod, cover crops, green manure crops that provide these four functions: maintain or improve soil organic matter, provide for pest management, manage deficient or excess plant nutrients, and provide for erosion control. And when you say crop rotation, a lot of things come to mind. If you've been farming conventionally for 20 years, you're probably going to say, I've got a great crop rotation. I grow corn and then I grow soybeans. And that's what is pretty common here in the Midwest. That rotation doesn't really work for organic for a couple of reasons. I'll get into that here in a second. But this is a common rotation that you see. It is what is called a 3-year rotation, where an organic farmer may grow corn 1 year, and then he will grow soybeans. And then on the 3rd year, they're going to mix it up and grow oats and alfalfa, or oats and barley, small grain with a legume. The definition of crop rotation, according to regulation, is the practice of alternating the annual crops grown on a specific field in a planned pattern or sequence in successive crop years, so that the crops of the same species or family are not grown repeatedly without interruption in the same field. So if you look at that corn bean example, those are the same annual crops grown year after year after year, and that doesn't necessarily comply with the regulation. And then for perennial cropping systems, this would be, something that comes back every year, like an apple orchard or a field of aronia berries. Perennial cropping systems employ means such as alley cropping, intercropping, and hedgerows to introduce biological diversity in lieu of crop rotation. So if you've got a permanent perennial crop, the regulations aren't going to make you rip it up every year or every few years. So the regulation also talks about how pests, weeds, and diseases are managed, and that is in 205, 206. And these are some of the ways that organic farmers would control weeds: mowing, livestock grazing, hand weeding and mechanical cultivation, flame, heat, or electrical means. Right, that right there is a crop flamer, and those have been around for quite a few years, where you would just burn off weeds. Synthetic herbicides are prohibited. So again, the conventional farmers, they've got a pretty big tool belt of products that they can use if they get into trouble. The organic farmers, they also have tools, but it's a different kind of tool. It's mainly equipment based. I'll tell you right now, there's no organic herbicide that's going to solve weed problems on your farm.
And then weed zapper.
Yeah, and I've got a picture of that right here. So this is a weed zapper, and they are, the bottom left there, they're relatively new here in the Midwest. I'm being told they've been in Texas and the southern states for, gosh, the last 15 or 20 years. And people have found luck with those if you can use it right after a rain when the weeds are still a little wet. And down in Texas, they would just turn on the irrigation pivots and irrigate the field and then come in and zap. Some considerations with that machine is that it's going to kill everything it touches. So you need to let the weeds outgrow the crop first. They're pretty common in soybean fields, where your ragweed, your water hemp might get above the soybean canopy. The weed zapper will take care of those. But some other considerations with that tool is that machine is about $80,000, and it takes a 250 horsepower tractor to move it. So, not everybody's going to be able to afford one of those. The upper left picture, that's just your standard 6-row cultivator. And you hear talk of weeds getting resistant to herbicides, but there hasn't been a weed yet that's resistant to iron. And those still do a pretty good job of getting weeds between the rows. And then the pictures on the right, we've got some farmers doing this on an experimental basis. It's a no-till organic. So they would grow a crop in the fall, likely cereal rye, and then they would crimp it down in the spring while they plant. And the idea of the crimper is that it's gonna slowly kill that rye and then provide a nice blanket or a weed mat that weeds can't poke through. I've seen success with that method. I've seen total failures with that method. It's all about timing.
So are they like rolling it or what?
Rolling it, yeah. So it's not a real good picture, but the roller has teeth that are at an angle, and then I think you fill those rollers with water to get them really heavy, and it's going to crimp the rye plant in several different places. You know, if you would just cut it off, it would die right there. But the crimping, it's kind of a slow death, and it lets it just kind of mellow out and stay right where it is. Mm-hmm.
We're not talking, I mean, even traditional farmers, they're still, when we talk about a plant being put out, what is the delay in harvest? Are we, or planting? Are we letting that die off and then planting into it?
Not necessarily. So in this picture, they're crimping and planting at the same time. So organic farmers are going to have a little different planting window than conventional farmers. And that's for a couple reasons. One, because the seeds aren't treated, so they've got to wait till the soil temperatures warm up. And then, you know, the second reason is just to throw off the cycles of pests and diseases. So like a common practice, not for this method, but would be to let a flush of weeds come up and then soil cultivate it down, and then let another flush of weeds come up and then to cultivate it down. So delayed planting is a method in weed control.
And to add to that, Dr. Kathleen Dellett of Iowa State University actually has some research on roller printing and whatnot. I can share that with you. She has done that research in Iowa with
Yeah, yep. And then this is just another slide about cultivators. So the top left, again, we've got our standard 6-row cultivator, but they're not really standard or uniform. And if you talk to an organic farmer that's been doing it for 15 or 20 years, he doesn't just have one cultivator. He might have half a dozen or more, because you want a cultivator that's going to do different functions. So for example, in between each of those rows, some may have a single sweep, one large 21-inch sweep. Some might have 3 or 5 sweeps. This is a basket cultivator. The bottom left it's a metal shield. So one method is to use the shields to cultivate when the crop is really short, because you don't want to throw dirt over the crop. And then the second pass, when the crop is about 2 to 3 foot tall, you would remove the shields or use a cultivator that doesn't have shields at all and drive a little faster and really try to throw that dirt and cover up the weeds. So again, I'm always fascinated when I go to a farm and just kind of see what tools work for different growers. And then another consideration is crop rotation is your best tool for weed management. And this picture here is an organic soybean field at the end of July. So he's got excellent weed control. And when you look at the conventional rotation of just growing 2 crops, corn and soybeans, that works well conventionally because we have herbicides. But for organic, you need to think of it this way. If you look at the planting and the cultivation windows of corn and soybeans, they're pretty similar. But when you throw in a crop like oats and clover or oats and alfalfa, small grain with a legume, you throw off those weed patterns, right? Corn and soybeans are generally planted in May, and you might cultivate in June, again in July or August, and harvest in the fall. But when you grow that small grain with a legume, you're harvesting the small grain, and then you've got hay or clover that pops back up, and then you're going to mow that field 2 or 3 times that year. And that really makes a difference in controlling weeds.
Question. So from your experience from traveling from the state of Iowa and seeing the farms, what do you think, you know, broad, obviously it varies where the farm is located, but what would you say is the most like successful crop rotation?
So
Row crop system?
the question was, what is the most successful crop rotation in a row crop system? And I guess before I answer that, I will say that we're not allowed to consult, which you know, so it's a little tough for me today to talk to you about, you know, what works and what doesn't, because every field, every farm is different. But generally, the longer you stretch out a row crop system, the weedier your fields are going to be. And that's generally speaking, you know, and that's where the money's at. You're going to make your money on your corn and soybeans, but how long can you do that consecutively? And most people are on a 3-year rotation. That's 2 years of row crops and then 1 year of the small grain legume. Some go as long as 5, but I will say you need that mix up at some point, or you're really going to set yourself up for struggle. It doesn't matter how nice or fancy or expensive your equipment is. It just seems like you got to do something different one of those years.
Is there much of a market, hopefully for, well, I'm not just gonna look for probably supposed to or something like that,
For small grains.
for, organic oats?
Yeah, there are markets out there for organic oats. I mean, cash flow wise, you're probably not going to make as much as you would on a corn and soybean year, but there are definitely people that would buy those crops from you.
And then what's the difference between food grade versus?
That I don't know. If it makes food grade, it's usually a couple dollars more.
I think it needs to be like a certain weight.
Test weight usually for oats, and from what I hear, people in the far south, southern Iowa, have trouble making the test weight. I don't know why, what the science is behind that, but yeah, there's definitely markets out there. Another thing that works for weed control is hay, straw, grass clippings, newspaper without glossy or colored ink, and then mulch, and I put tree mulch. Mulch is not mulch. Ground up pallets would not be approved to use for organic mulch because the pallets in the shipping world are often fumigated when they go into the semi trailers. If you have mulch that is colored with some dye for a different color, that would likely not be allowed. And then plastic mulch and row covers are allowed. For annuals, they must be removed at the end of the growing season, and for perennials, removed when the material begins to deteriorate. And again, this is more of a, you know, like a fruit and vegetable type operation. Most ag farmers aren't going to go out and row cover or mulch a field of size. Another big component of the regulation is the seed and planting stock standard, and that's in 205, 204. And the requirement is that you must use organic seed and planting stock. There is an exception that if you cannot find enough or organic seeds and organic that you're looking for, then you can use an untreated non-GMO variety, and you must do a seed search to document your attempts. So an important takeaway is that the regulation doesn't say you can use organic or non-GMO. It says you must use organic first. So we require producers to use organic seed first, and if they can't find the organic seeds they're looking for, only then can they use an untreated and non-GMO seed. And that's also important that it's non-GMO and that it does not have any prohibited seed treatments on it.
Is there still real challenges finding seed, or?
I think it's out there. I think the organic varieties tend to improve every year. We hear different reasons for people not wanting to use it. I don't know if not finding it is a big one. Another big component of the standard is soil fertility and crop nutrient management, and that's in 205, 203. And that states the producer must select tillage, cultivation, and crop rotation practices that maintain or improve soil condition and minimize soil erosion. This is the part of the regulation why soilless systems are not allowed. You might hear of hydroponics or aquaponics. We don't certify that mainly because there is no soil. And if you look at this picture, that's a strip cropping field. We see a lot of that in the northeast corner where it's really hilly. And that farmer has planted rows of corn, and then it looks like alfalfa. And he's doing that so the field doesn't erode. Tilling up that whole field could be problematic for a couple of reasons. And then the regulation also states that producers must manage plant and animal materials to maintain or improve organic matter without contributing to contamination of plant, soil, and water. So if you look at that, how do we verify that a producer is maintaining or improving soil conditions? One way would be through soil testing, and we don't require a soil test every year. But it's good to get a good baseline and then maybe test again in 3 or 5 years. And we should see those soil levels at minimum staying the same, but hopefully improving year after year. And that is done in an organic system if you're managing plants and animal materials correctly.
Question.
Yes.
So you mentioned that you don't certify hydroponics.
That's correct.
However, there are certain
Yeah.
certifying agencies that do.
So the question was, we at IDALS, we do not certify hydroponic operations, but there are certification agencies that do. And how do they get around it? And the shortest answer is I don't know. I don't know. And that's where if you go to the certifier locator and you want to, be a hydroponic or an aquaponic producer, that would be a really good question to ask your certifier in your search is, how do you allow it and how do I do it? Because this is a very key component of the regulation in 205, 203.
And do you anticipate that sticking with the National Organic Program? Because there's been some debate on if that should be allowed.
Yeah. I guess in my 10 years, I've had a handful of people ask or complain that we should be doing it. We haven't had a big enough push to really try. That's a great question. I don't know how people get around that part of the regulation. Is there another question in the back?
Well, I was, with the tillage and then the kind of soil fertility stuff, do you kind of have limits on tillage at all on cooking ground, or is it just kind of, is it kind of a?
We don't really have,
kind of.
the question was, do we have limits on tillage and how much tillage? And no, we really don't. Our inspectors do look for things like erosion. So if we go out there and your field's just full of these, ruts, that would be something you'd get written up for. Cover crops are also used, in the hillier rotations, and then the strip cropping, like the picture, we see a lot of that. But there's really no limit to say, hey, you can or can't till this much.
Can you explain what written up entails?
Written up would be cited for something, and I've got some slides later about some common citations. But if an inspector is at your farm and he sees, a practice or something that's not right, he would cite you for it in his report, and then that report would get passed on to the certification agency when they make their decision.
And how long does that farmer have to rectify?
It just depends on how bad it is. It depends how quickly the file is reviewed. A lot of different factors there. But if an issue is not corrected, it may start as a minor issue or a small problem. And then if you do the same thing in year 2 or 3, it may turn into a non-compliance or a bigger problem. And if non-compliances are not corrected, then you could be looking at a notice of suspension. And suspension would be basically kicking you out of the organic program, which no one wants to get kicked out. Okay, so along with 205, 203, sewage sludge is prohibited, basically human waste. And I know what you're thinking, why would anybody use that? That is occasionally used in the conventional world. It may be composted or turned into a different product, but sewage sludge is strictly prohibited in organic. Synthetic fertilizers are prohibited. Animal manure is allowed provided that nothing prohibited is added. And you might think, well, what could be added to manure? And there are all sorts of things that could be added to manure. The hog industry might use something in their hog pits to make the manure not foam or to make the manure not cake up. The poultry industry may use something in their bedding to control ammonia, that sort of thing. So we do have to verify that if raw manure is used, that nothing prohibited is being added.
Sorry, I saw somebody
Oh,
raise their
fine.
hand. If you guys have questions, be sure to type them into the Q&A portion of the event, okay?
And then manure does not have to come from an organic source. So you can go to a conventional chicken house or a conventional hog confinement or dairy and use that manure, provided that nothing prohibited is added. And we actually have a form for that we would make our producers go to the supplier before using it. And the supplier of the manure would have to disclose anything that's added to that manure.
Unless you've already used it. You go back.
You want to get approval for all products before you use them, and I'll go into that in more detail here.
And Jamie, you see there's a Q&A, there's one question.
Okay, you want me to take it now?
Yeah, might as well.
All right, I'm gonna attempt to take this question here. We'll see if I can figure this out. It's from anonymous attendee. Does the manure need to be incorporated in a certain length of time? That is a good question, and that only applies to food crops. So for corn and soybeans, anything that humans don't actually eat, there's no application window. For food crops, there is.
So if you want to, yeah. If
Okay,
you want to,
I think that's my next slide.
is it going?
Yep,
forward?
that
Okay,
works. So animal manure may be used without the following, with the following restrictions for crops intended for human consumption. So raw manure must be incorporated at least 120 days prior to harvest if the food portion contacts the soil. So that would be crops like potatoes that's grown in ground. You would have to apply your manure 120 days or more prior to harvest. And then it's a 90-day rule if the edible portion does not contact the soil. So that would be like sweet corn. You'd have to apply your manure 90 days or longer prior to harvest. Okay, so what products can I use? The National Organic Program does not provide a standard list for allowed products. I wish they did. It'd make my job a lot easier, but they don't. So product review is dependent on the certification agency. So whatever certifier you choose to work with, you need to get every product approved by them prior to using it. And the other thing to remember is that agencies don't often share their product lists with one another, and they don't always agree. So if you work with IDALS, we may approve a product that another certifying agent, say MOSA or MCIA, may not approve. And I see this common problem doing inspections is that, you know, somebody's got a cousin or a brother that's certified with so-and-so, and they let them use this and we don't. So it's always good to get approval first. And getting approval would mean submitting a label or an MSDS sheet to your certifier. As an organic grower, you are responsible for submitting the label. Don't call your file reviewer when you're at the edge of the field, you know, waiting to apply something. You need weeks or months in advance. And we do spend a lot of time tracking down labels because a lot of these companies selling organic products don't want their labels or their ingredient lists just floating around out there. So sometimes it's kind of it is difficult to get the information we need. The other thing I'll say is the word proprietary means nothing. If they won't tell us what's in it, we are not going to allow it. And we do have that happen.
Another question.
Okay.
And also you can click live, answer live, and then they'll go away. So you click on Q&A.
Okay. What about food grade white corn? Okay, that is a good question. So if your corn is food grade, then the manure application rule would apply. It would be the 90-day rule.
Then click done. And now we'll
All right.
and then X out. Thank you.
Okay. And then again, with what products I can use, this is kind of how certifiers make their determinations, is any product has to fall within one category. It's either synthetic or it's natural. And generally speaking, synthetic substances are prohibited unless they're on the national list in 205601. And that's a short list of allowed synthetics. Non-synthetic or natural substances are generally allowed unless they are prohibited. And that's listed on 205602. So you've got the prohibited synthetics, and then the allowed synthetics and the prohibited naturals. I'm stuck again. Okay, so for input documentation, you must maintain product labels, purchase invoices, and document your usage. And you have to keep these records for a minimum of 5 years. Like I said, we review products for the producers that certify with us. We don't review products on behalf of companies, and we don't review products on behalf of producers that don't certify with us. So it's dependent on the agency you work with. OMRI is a good organization out there. It stands for Organic Materials Review Institute. they've got a website and a long list of the OMRI accepted materials. Generally, most certifiers are going to accept OMRI products, but you still need to go through and submit the product name and the label. Okay, so now after hearing that, you're probably all really interested in becoming organic. So I'll tell you how to get there from here. You need to go to that OID website and find an organic certifier. And once you reach out to that certifier, you will complete what's called an OSP, or an organic system plan. And the organic system plan is going to be different depending on which certifier you choose to work with. You must comply with the organic requirements, and that means all the requirements, but I touched on some of the large ones, like soil fertility and land requirements. You have to meet their application windows and get an organic inspection. You have to maintain records, and if you do all of that, you will obtain certification. So here's some record keeping requirements. The application packet is divided into different sections that reflect different requirements. And I'm actually going to go through, if we have time, I will go through an organic system plan at the end of this, just to show you guys what that looks like. And your application is your organic system plan, and it must be updated annually with the certifier. You must keep a copy. Everybody could write this down. When you submit your organic system plan, don't think of it as a pass-fail. If you're missing documents, your certifier will tell you what you need to submit. The organic system plan is also known as the blueprint of your farming operation. So you can't possibly know if you're doing the right thing if you didn't keep a copy. And then another thing that works is to develop a binder system. And I like to tell people to develop a binder system for each year of certification. It's just the cleanest way to do it. And then any document that you produce or obtain that year of certification goes in that year's binder. So here is what the regulation says about record keeping. And record keeping is outlined in 205-103. And it says a certified operation must maintain records concerning the production, harvesting, and handling of agricultural products that are or that are intended to be sold, labeled, or represented as 100% organic or organic. The regulation also goes on to say that such records must be adapted to the particular business that the certified operation is conducting, fully disclose all activities and transactions of the certified operation in sufficient detail as to be readily understood and audited, be maintained for not less than 5 years beyond their creation, and be sufficient to demonstrate compliance with the Act and the regulations in its part. And then the certified operation must make such records available for inspection and copying during normal business hours by authorized representatives of the Secretary, the applicable state programs governing state official, and the certifying agent. So the translation to that long explanation is you must keep records. If you don't keep records, you're not going to get certified and you're not going to stay certified. There's no one way to keep your records, but you must document and record any and all activity which is related to your organic business. So again, if you've got that binder system, anytime an organic record is generated, it should go into that binder. And then you are required to keep those records for a minimum of 5 years. Certifiers are required to keep their records for 10 years, and you can certainly keep your records beyond that 5 year. And then the last bullet point, records need to be available at the time of inspection within a reasonable time. Have your stuff ready when the inspector comes. You know, if the inspector asks to audit your field activity records and you left it in your tractor 10 miles down the road, your records are not ready. If the inspector asks for your settlement sheets from the previous year and they're up, stuffed away at the attic or the accountant's office, your records are not ready for the inspection. So the big idea is record what you did and know where it's recorded. You don't get partial credit for writing something down and losing it. Oftentimes, it's kind of a struggle at inspections. You hear the farmer say, I know I wrote it down. I know I wrote it down, but again, you're going to get written up or cited for it if you don't have it ready. So recording what you did, answering the W's, you need to record who, what, when, and where. And here's an example of a record that would go into a field activity log. May 15th, Jack planted corn in field 28. So we've got the who, Jack, the when, and the where. It's very important. Types of field activity logs, spreadsheets, diaries, phone notes, memo books, and calendars. There's no one way to document your field activities. Just do whatever works for you. The other thing I would mention about this is people ask, well, what is a field activity? It's basically anything you're doing. So if you're out milking dairy cows, you need to write down what days you milked your dairy cows. If you're doing work in an organic field, like cultivating or planting, you need to write those dates down. These are examples of potential logs. You can use any of those. I could probably make a longer list of what not to use. But I'll leave some of those out. You know, the dust on the dashboard of your truck, it's not a real reliable place to write your planting dates down. YouTube channels, smartphones don't really work the best. Some guys keep journals, and that's fine, but you know, if your journal is private with your thoughts and feelings, that's not a real good spot to keep it either, because your inspector is going to audit your field activities, and they need to see every date of field work that was done. And then can you find it? Knowing where your records are is a key part to having a smooth inspection. And 205-103 is probably the most common citation before I mentioned getting written up. And that's what this means. If your inspector finds something wrong or some kind of unconformity to the plan, they're going to cite you for it. And the 205-103 would be a record keeping citation if a document or more was not ready. Okay, so in addition to the field activity log, I'm going to go into some different records that you're going to have to maintain for organic certification. The first one is seed documents, and we require two forms of identification when you purchase seed. The first one is a seed tag, a seed tag of each variety. So if you buy 100 bags of soybeans and they're all the same variety, just rip one tag off and put that tag in your organic binder. You also need to save your invoices and your receipts. So the tag is going to show proof that you actually went out and purchased that variety. And then the invoice is going to show how much you actually purchased. If it's an organic seed, it's going to say right on the tag who the organic certifier was. If you couldn't find organic seed and you had to use an untreated non-GMO seed, there's usually a form that accompanies that seed just to let certification staff know that it is untreated and non-GMO. Fertilizer and input documentation. Again, you need to maintain labels of all inputs being used, as well as invoices to show how much of that input that you purchased. Your inspector is also going to look at your equipment cleanout log. Split operations are allowed and quite common. Most of the farms we see have a conventional side and an organic side. And you've really got two options here. You could just buy two of everything. That's option number one. You could have two planters, two discs, two combines, etc., and not clean anything out. But that's not real feasible for most people. So what they will do is have one set of equipment that is cleaned, and your equipment needs to be properly cleaned each time you switch from conventional production to organic. And then you need to document the date and method that you cleaned it. Anything with moving parts is going to require a purge. So if you've got a combine, for example, hitting your combine with a garden hose is not going to clean it out. You're going to have to take off the header, remove everything you can see, and then run some organic crop through is what's called a purge. And then that purged amount would be, fed to non-organic livestock or sold on the conventional market.
So what does clean up entail besides water? What else needs to be used to clean the equipment? Is there
So the question is, what else needs to be used to clean equipment? Water is common, air. A lot of guys would take just an air hose and blow it out. Basically, you just have to get all the debris or conventional crop out of whatever you're cleaning. Because the last thing you would want to do is to fail to clean something and then have a load of corn or soybeans get rejected at the buyer. that would really be a shame to fill out all that paperwork and go through all of the hassle and steps of an inspection, all to have your end product contaminated.
But no, like soap,
It's not real common, no.
just water.
Air, yeah, air, water, and a purge. Those are the main ones. It just depends. There's a question in the OSP that asks about cleanouts, and then that's something the certification agency would evaluate. So if you're, a large grain elevator that's, got a grain pit or a grain leg, and you're doing several thousands of conventional bushels, you're going to need a pretty substantial purge, and clean out ahead of time. It's usually in excess of 10 bushels. So it just kind of depends on what it is. And then you also have to have dedicated storage sites that are properly labeled. So that would be like your grain bins. We like them to be labeled with a number. You could spray paint on it or get like a magnet or a sticker, but just have everything identified. So for sales records, when you go and sell that crop, you will need a bill of lading, and which is also a clean truck affidavit. And that's going to show what the product is and where it's going. So bill of ladings need to be used every time the product is leaving your farm. Scale tickets, that's like if you go and sell grain, they'll give you a scale ticket right when you check out that shows this is how many bushels that were sold, and then any deductions. And then the settlement records or sales receipts usually comes a week or two later after you're paid. Okay, so what to expect at an inspection? That slide's kind of wordy. So every operation is going to be inspected at least once annually. The inspection usually takes 2 to 3 hours, but that really just depends. The inspector needs to see your entire operation. So if you've got fields that are scattered throughout multiple counties, it's really going to extend that inspection time. If your records are not in order, or if you didn't keep an OSP or a binder, that could really extend your inspection time. So the inspection window could greatly vary. And then unannounced inspections and sampling may also occur. Every certifier is required to conduct a certain amount of unannounced inspections or sampling, and they can be random or cause-based. So if you are selected for sampling or not announced, don't assume you did something wrong, because it may just be random and routine to meet that quota.
And how many operations that unannounced, percentage-wise?
Percentage-wise, certifiers are required to do 5% of inspections unannounced, and additionally 5% sampling. And that's standard across the board with whoever you work with. So the farm inspection, I think people get really intimidated, especially if you haven't been inspected before. But the inspection can really be broken into 2 parts. It's going to be a portion of outside time and a portion of inside time. So when the inspector is outside, they're going to look at all of your fields, organic, transitional, and conventional. They're going to look at your buffer areas, storage locations, and equipment. And then they're going to come inside usually and review the records. So they want to verify that you're following your organic system plan. They'll do different audits to see if you purchased enough seed. They'll look at the inputs that you used and your field activity log. That's another big one. You've got to have that log ready at the time of inspection. And then sales records. We want to see how much you grew. You might have the same inspector for multiple years. We try to rotate every 3 to 4 years, and there's pros and cons to having the same inspector. But one, we don't want farmers and inspectors getting too familiar with people, so it's good to send in a fresh set of eyes every now and then. The downside to that is if you have a new inspector every single year that's not familiar with your operation, you might have to explain yourself again or tell them the same thing over and over. But you won't have the same inspector forever. There will be some changeover. So these are the 3 main audits that your inspector is going to do when he or she is at your farm. The first audit is a seed audit, and that is done to verify that you purchased enough seed to support the acres that you're requesting for certification. The second audit is a traceability exercise, and then the third one is a mass balance. Traceability would be proving that you can trace products throughout your whole system. And I've got some slides coming up about that. And then the mass balance is just how much did you grow? What was your average yield? So seed audit, we talked about that. Verify enough seed was purchased to support the acreage requested. Traceback audit, following the crops or livestock product through its growth cycle on the farm, and documentation. These are the records that you'd view for a traceability exercise. I would usually start on the way out, then look at sales documents, and then go back through the system to the shipping documents, to the field activity records, and then trace it back all the way through the seed that was actually planted. And these are the records that you would view in a mass balance exercise: sales settlements, field histories, planting records, seed invoices, storage records, and harvest records. And the main thing with the mass balance is we want to know kind of how much you produced and what your average yield was. So this is a very important slide. It is the role of an inspector. And like I mentioned earlier, as an inspector or a certification agency, we cannot consult. And believe me when I say I want to see all of you succeed as organic farmers, but it is not my role to help you get there. So inspectors should inspect all fields, equipment, storage locations, conduct mass balance and traceability audits, verify the producer is following their OSP, and write and submit an inspection report to the certifier. Inspectors should not provide management or consultation advice, tell a producer which products to use or not use, make input decisions, assist the producer with marketing or selling their crop, or conduct any business with the producer for at least 12 months before or after the inspection. So every year we update our conflict of interest statements just to make sure that no one on staff or on contracts has a conflict of interest. The other thing I'll mention is we fill out these inspector scorecards or evaluations each year. That's always kind of interesting to see how those come back. And occasionally, you'll get one that says, well, that inspector was terrible. He didn't help me with anything. He didn't tell me anything. And it's, that's really their role. They're not there to help you. So after the inspection, your inspector is going to fill out a document called an exit interview. And this is the inspector's time to tell you any concerns that he or she may have, just so they don't leave there and say, hey, everything looks great. And then you get this report that they just wrote Jeff for everything for. So the exit interview, it's a time to communicate concerns. And it's also a time to nail down on specific acreage that, okay, you grew these crops and this is how many acres you had, or this is how many dairy cows or chickens you had. So just be mindful of what you're signing, because once that form is signed by both parties, it's pretty hard for the certifier to go back and change it without doing a follow-up inspection. So the inspector is going to write that report and submit it to the certifier. And then it's the certification staff that is going to review the inspection report and make a certification decision. So inspectors do not make certification decisions. Once I turn in that report to the office, I'm essentially done. At no point in time will they come back to me and say, hey, do you think this guy should get certified because X, Y, and Z? They may point out grammatical errors that I made on the report or give me a hard time on that, but I'm completely left out of the certification decision as an inspector. So after the report is filed and a certification decision is made, you will get an organic certificate if you pass everything. And you will need this certificate in order to sell any crop as organic. So that's kind of the final step in the process. And you can see the certificate there shows corn, hay, oats, and soybeans. It's going to have a date on it and a seal along with the program manager's signature. That is. So again, you need that certificate before making any organic sales. And here's the kind of a snapshot of the whole process. So when the files come in, you'll get what's called a pre-inspection review, where your file manager is going to view the file for initial compliance. If you pass that, then you would get moved on to an inspection. The inspector comes, does an inspection, files the report, and then your file is reviewed again, what's called a post-inspection review. And then a certification decision is made. Did we get logged out? Okay, that was my last slide. We can open it up to questions. And then I've actually got an OSP template I can show you guys.
You want to go over a bit about fees and the structure on there?
I could, yes, we had a question about fees, so I brought our fee sheet. I might need Olga's help. Oh, there we go. Oh, I had it. Do you want me to start with fees, Katie?
What's that?
Do you want me to start with fees?
Oh, I was just.
I'll do the OSP first before I. Okay, let me get it pulled up first. And how do I get that? There we go.
Click on stop share. And go back into you see that arrow up that says share screen. Go down
It's always harder when people are looking at you.
right there.
Okay.
And then there. Keep that. And then just move it.
Can I make this bigger?
If you click on the green button.
Okay. So I'm gonna go over ROSP here at IDALS. And again, this would only apply if you choose to certify with us. If you go with another certifier, they're gonna have different forms and fees, but this is what our application or OSP looks like. And page 1 of the general information section asks for how you're applying. So you've really got two choices here. You can apply as an individual if you farm that way, or if you have a corporation or an LLC or some legal structure. It's important to know if you're applying as an individual or a business. There can also only be one name per organic certificate. So if you want to farm with, your son or your brother, you got to have one name. If they're separate operations, then you guys would need separate applications, because only one name is going to be listed on the final certificate. Page 2, we asked for your farm address and the counties where your farm is located, and some directions from the nearest town. And that's just so the inspector can find your operation. And then we want to know if this is your first time applying with us or if you're renewing. And these are important questions here because it helps us dictate who gets inspected first. If you have a new crop, meaning something that you're growing for the first time, or something that was not on your last year's certificate, then we're going to review your file first and do what we can to get you an early inspection, because you are going to need that updated certificate before you sell that new crop. Page 3 has some questions about to export your crop. Do you have a copy of your OSP? Hopefully everybody checks yes to that. If you check no, that might be you might be getting a hold letter from your certifier sending you more information. Do you have a copy of the NOP regulations or know how to access them? Again, that's the website I showed you at the beginning. We ask if you're certified by another agency or if you have ever been certified with another agency. How do you record your field activities? That was another slide we talked about. Is your filing system a calendar, notebook, journal, or other? And then these are the records that we're asking, which records you plan on keeping. And then the affirmation statement just says that you agree to follow all of the rules and pay all of your fees on time. So again, that was the general information section. That's one of the shorter pieces.
Are you looking to go back into that folder?
Yeah, that folder.
It should be right there. Right here.
Okay, perfect. Do I need to share my screen again?
Yeah, so you could share. So, pull that document back up. So let's see. Was it a Word doc?
It was on the Internet Explorer.
Oh, it was. No.
Let's try to open it again.
Okay, this one right here.
Yeah.
So you want to
There it
leave
is.
it, and then that way, then we can. Yeah,
Okay.
There.
Thank you, Olga.
you bet.
Okay, so this is our organic system plan. And I know a lot of people dread paperwork, but if you look at the pages here, I think it's only 8 pages. So that, I mean, that's not that bad, an 8-page document that you've got to fill out every year. So I'm going to go through this one page at a time. I don't believe any of our forms are available online. And we had some problems a few years ago with, we had everything up there. And people would contact us outside of the application window, and they might send in like one form, like the field history, for example, and think they applied, and it really wasn't, we had no record of it. So you'd have to contact us for forms and get on our list if you want to apply with us. I don't believe any of these are posted. So section 1, certification intentions. We ask which crops you're growing, and then does it fall under organic, transitional, or conventional? And then we want to know the field numbers and acres. So you would just kind of itemize out each field that you have. And then in bold at the bottom, you've got to provide a map, which includes the following: field numbers, farm borders, buffer areas, etc. If you're computer savvy, you can just go on to like Google Maps or Google Earth and get a nice picture that way. Some people hand draw maps, which works too. Or you could go to your local FSA office and get a really nice colored map. They're willing to provide one. Do you guys provide maps for farmers?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. We do provide maps if we are in color and if we request them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great.
You also, if you have a little doc on an actual home.
Oh, okay.
Portal.
Nice. So section 2 talks about land and water. So we ask if you've managed all fields for organic certification for more than 3 years. If not, you would need a previous operator affidavit. Anytime you bring in new land, you'd have to have the prior operator that farmed it sign off on when the date of the last prohibited input was. What steps have you taken to minimize the risk of accidental contamination of prohibited substances? So again, like we talked about earlier, are you on the sensitive crops registry? Have you contacted neighbors? Do you have no spray signs posted? What have you done to limit drift? Do you irrigate your crops? If so, what's the source of your water? And then there's also an element to biodiversity, that organic operations have to do something to promote biodiversity on your farm. So we give you some options that you could check. Otherwise, there's examples for other that you could write in your own practices. Section 3, soil fertility, crop nutrients and rotations. We ask if there's any soil erosion challenges that you have, what conservation practices are used, and then what are the main components of your soil fertility plan. Number 24, we ask about your crop rotation. So each year is designated as one, so you'd want to tell us your projected plan for the next 6 years. And then do you use cover crops, sod crops, or catch crops? What is your plan to improve soil fertility? Some options there. And then how do you monitor the effectiveness of that plan? Number 28, are you using products that contain synthetic micronutrients? Yes or no? Synthetic micronutrients are only allowed if a soil test shows you have a deficiency. So you would need a test in the last 3 years to document that deficiency prior to using. And then we ask about manure. If you use manure, you have to designate if it comes from off farm or on farm, and then the type. What strategies are implemented to prevent manure from contaminating food, crops, and water. We ask if you're growing food crops, so we know if that 90 to 120 day rule applies. Section 4 talks about seeds. You'd want to fill out this table to the best of your ability. And we kind of realize that all of these things change. Once you submit your OSP to the certifier, you're not really stuck to it. It is a moving document, and you can always add a new input or add a new seed if you communicate that with your certifier. It's not a pass-fail. And then when your inspector comes to your farm, he's going to have a copy of your OSP and go through this with you just to make sure you're following these practices. Section 5, we ask about your problem pests, insects, weeds, and diseases, and how you plan to control those. Section 6 talks about a greenhouse or high tunnel if you have them. That is not applicable for most people. Section 7, if you have a split operation, we want to know how you're keeping prohibited substances out, whether that's a clean out log, and how you're doing that. Number 65 asks what equipment and harvest containers come in contact with organic and non-organic products. '67 asks where you store any non-organic inputs. Like we mentioned earlier, it is pretty common to have a split operation producing conventional and organic crops. So you need to demonstrate that you're keeping the organic operation separate from the conventional and vice versa. Section 8 talks about harvest, post-harvest, and marketing. Storage, you'd list all of your storage locations in this table. And then how do you prevent or control pests in your storage areas? Number 81 is a big one. Your crops must be traceable, and that's done through a lot number. So any load of outgoing grain that leaves your farm would have to have a lot number assigned to it. And the lot number would need to be unique to your operation. And it's usually a combination of the producer's initials, field number, and year. So you want to make it unique to your farm. So for example, a lot number like soybeans 2023 is not really good because other people could have that same lot number. But if you throw in your initials, the field number, and then the crop and year, that can stand out for yourself. Okay, that is all I've got for organic system plans. Any questions about those forms? Okay. All right, so I'm going to talk about our fee schedule. If you want to be organic, it is going to cost money, and the fees are going to vary from certifier to certifier. The one thing I found is it's kind of tough to find a chart comparing all the certifiers' fees. If you want to shop around a little, you're going to have to call each certifier and kind of ask them for that information. But our fees are broken down into 3 payments. First one is your application fee, which you pay at the time that you send in your application. And that application fee is $125 if it is postmarked prior to March 15th. Anything after that, there is a $100 late fee. And then the final deadline is April 15th for all applicants. So that is fee number 1, your application fee. The inspection fee, fee number 2, and the inspection fee varies from operation to operation. We have a base fee of $350. That would be if you have, a crop farm or a livestock farm. If you have multiple enterprises, it does start tacking on more money. And then if you are over, I think it's 3 hours on site, you're going to start being billed $50 per hour after 3 hours. And that's kind of the fairest way to do it. There's some inspections I can do in 1 hour or less. And there's some that take all day. You know, you got to see every field. If there are farmers out there that are spread across the county or multiple counties, and you may spend 10 or 12 hours at one farm.
You have to see all the conventional fields and everything.
Yeah, you got to see everything and the equipment. And then if they've got a lot of fields, okay, so you did the outside part, well, then they're going to have a lot of records. So then, you know, the record keeping takes twice as long too.
And is the record keeping that keeps it good and organized on your conventional stuff, the part of it, your organic for you?
Yeah, it is.
We
Yep.
See all that.
Well,
It's the same record keeping for the conventional that you do for the organic.
so every inspector is going to ask for different things. I would say the biggest records is going to be like your mass balance. We're going to know what your organic yields were and sales, and then we want to know what your conventional yields and sales were. An inspector may do some spot audits, like, well, if you had this many conventional corn acres, you know, show me how much urea you purchased, and make sure that you didn't purchase like way more than what was needed for your conventional acres. Generally, an inspector is going to focus more on the organic side. And then the final fee is your certification fee. And again, this is just our fee structure. That the fees do vary a lot by certifiers. So we bill the certification fee on a per acre basis. So corn and soybeans are billed at $6 an acre, so $6 times the number of acres you have. Peas, dry beans are $6 an acre. Small grains, $2.25. Your hay is $1.75. Pasture is only 75 cents. And then it gets into some livestock fees here as well. So, you know, that would dollar up pretty good if you had a lot of crops, a lot of acres. There's a $150 minimum fee. So some people do fall under that minimum. $200 minimum. We did up that this year. So the timing of the fees, the first one you pay, the application fee is paid at the time you send your application in. The inspection fee is going to be paid the day of your inspection. And then this third fee, your certification fee, is paid at the end after you get your organic certificate. And that's about all I have. If there's any questions about fees or anything else I talked about, I'm happy to answer them, try to answer them.
For those of you guys online, this is a good opportunity to ask some questions of Jamey. Jamey, then you're done with the presentation, correct?
I am.
Okay. So if there are no questions at the moment, that's okay. We'll go ahead and take a 5-minute break just to give everybody the chance to stretch out, use the bathroom if needed. And so we'll be back at 1:46, okay? So, yeah. I'll pause the recording.
Well,
Okay,
I
guys.
thought about asking you a question on that. I think
It's 1:47. We have some conversations here going on, but we'll give those a minute.
It was 2 years ago now, but it was people that did organic too. And they were in the middle of things, and they had to bring it up to guys throwing alfalfa on it. And the way I understand, nothing doesn't have any chemicals or any more fertilizer put on it. And I'm hoping to plant a organic corn crop on the spring, but that's what I was. Little area, I suppose we probably kept us a pretty good plan of what we were doing.
Yeah,
But
yeah, right there. So you can click on that. And then click share.
I'm just getting started on that, I don't know when. You can help me too.
All right, I'm gonna get started so I don't keep you guys too long with our FSA programs, but I do want to introduce myself before I start sharing my screens. My name is Amanda Weigel. I am with the Farm Service Agency, and I am one of our program specialists out of our state office. And specifically, I take care of our specialty programs here in the state office. So today I'll be going over some of those specialty programs that can actually benefit you as an organic producer. Some of these may not fit into your actual organic operation, but with the Iowa seeing more and more people trying to get a variety of crops in the ground, and I want to make sure that I share all of the organic opportunities that you guys have with the FSA office. That's going to include our organic certification crop share program, the non-insurable crop disaster assistance program, and the tree assistance program, or what we are going to talk about specifically today. But at the end of this slide deck, I will also provide a list of other programs that the FSA offers that organic producers can benefit from. Let me go ahead and share my presentation and we can jump right into it. Okay. So first, we're going to talk about the organic certification cost share program. And moving forward, it's going to be important to know that when I say OCCSP, that's our acronym, and it just makes it a lot easier. So moving forward, you're going to hear me say OCCSP. So the USDA Organic Certification Cost Share Program is administered by the Farm Service Agency, and it provides organic producers and handlers financial assistance to reduce the cost of certifying their organic crops. The program reimburses producers and handlers for a portion of their paid certification cost. Once certified, organic producers and handlers are eligible to receive reimbursement for 50% of certification costs each year, up to $500 per scope. So we did hear Jamey talk about scopes earlier today in his presentation, and those scopes are going to be crops, livestock, wild crops, even though IDALS doesn't certify that as organic. One of the other, I believe MOSA is one on that list that does certify wild crops, and then handling fees. You're also going to see state organic program fees listed on this slide, but it is important to know that while that is listed in the federal regulation, state organic program fees are only eligible in the state of California at this time. To be eligible for OCCSP, a producer must have a current organic certification at the time of application and must have paid certification fees during the year the producer is seeking cost share. So what is a program year? It's not necessarily your planting season. So I did want to provide this slide that's a nice table. And as we moved into the 2023 program year, FSA will cover expenses that were paid from October 1st, 2022 through September 30th of 2023. And those application deadlines for 2023 are going to land on October 31st, 2023. But it is important to remember, Jamey was saying that sometimes the reviewers and inspectors can't make it out to your field until October. So you aren't going to have that inspection done and your updated certification on file until after our deadline, because by the time they do your inspection and mail that out, there's a gap in that, and we understand that. So we do have late certification fees for OCCSP. However, funding is not currently available at this time for program year 2023, but as soon as it does become available, it is available on a first come, first served basis. Iowa has never specifically ran out of funding, and we've always been able to pay our eligible cost share applicants. But in the instance that we have more people apply and we do run out of funding, if that funding is gone at the time that a organic producer applies, we will not be able to pay that. So while we may approve the application, you may never see payment. Often FSA will get questions on if a producer transitioning to organics is eligible for these cost share payments. And it is important to note that with OCCSP funds, those people who are transitioning are not eligible for cost share payments. Many of you may have heard of or participated in our OTECP program that was available through our pandemic assistance funding. That funding is no longer available, and we do not have any word on any kind of program for transitional producers at this time. But reach out to your county office and continue to ask, and we will make sure that we let our county offices know if anything does come to fruition for those transitioning producers. As producers applying for OCCSP, it is important to know what costs are and are not reimbursable when you come to apply in our FSA office. So you can use this slide as reference so when you go in, but reimbursable fees include application fees, inspection costs, fees related to equivalency agreements or arrangements, travel per diem for inspectors, user fees, sales assessments, and postage. And non-reimbursable and reimbursable fees that include equipment, materials, supplies, transitional certification fees, late fees, and inspections necessary to address non-organic program regulation violations. So one thing to consider when you get your bill in the mail from your organic certifier is to make sure that it is broken out and itemized, because our county offices have to review these, and if we aren't specifically sure that this is an eligible reimbursable cost that you are being charged and you've paid, then we may not be able to include it on your application. Specifically with IDALS, since we have Jamey here today, I do want to say that as an organic producer being certified through IDALS, currently you do not need to provide us with bills. We have an agreement in place with IDALS here in the state of Iowa that allows us to have them send us a spreadsheet with information who we have shared customers with, and we do utilize that, and it's been very nice, and it makes it easier for you producers out there utilizing that, because they break down that spreadsheet on reimbursable and non-reimbursable fees. When applying for OCCSP, you may do so at any participating state agency or at any of the FSA offices across the nation. In the state of Iowa, we do not have any participating state agency, so FSA is your only option to apply for OCCSP. However, if you are a multi-state producer and the other states that you operate in have a state agency, it is important to remember that you can only apply for this cost share once per program year. So you will need to decide if you're going to apply at the state agency or if you're going to apply with FSA. So that was a really quick breakdown. When Olga first asked me to do this, she said I'd have 30 minutes to 45 minutes, and I wanted to make sure we got several programs talked about. So if anybody has any questions on our OCCSP program, please feel free to ask now, or you can even ask as we get into our next program that we're going to talk about. But you also have the option to visit fsa.usda.gov/organics, and that is going to provide you with additional information. But my first request is always go to your FSA office. They are always willing to help. If they don't have the answer, they'll reach out to me at the state office level. And if I don't have the answer, I can reach out to the national office level. And that goes for all the programs that we talk about today. So any questions? Jamey.
See the number of participants increasing each year?
So once we introduced the OTECP program last year, because we were including those transitional producers in that secondary program, yes, we saw a lot more applicants, which shows us we will see more organic producers applying for OCCSP once they get through that transitional period. But I don't know that I can say here in the state of Iowa specifically that we saw a huge uptick in the last few years of organic producers, but we do see more people transitioning. Would you agree with that on your end, or?
So we've gotten the USDA survey from 2021. So prior to that, so the surveys are being conducted on, every 2 to 3 years. So in 2019, we had like 30,000, 33,000 more organic acres in 2019. And then from 2019 to 2021, the acres total was slightly less, but it was still an uptick. It was still, I want to say like maybe 27,000 acres more organic. So we're seeing more organic acres in the state. I'm not sure like percentage wise exactly where that lands, but it's growing.
So you're talking acres, but maybe not specifically producers.
Well,
again, I think if we included the transitionals in there, we would see more of them. But and I think we do like a slight increase every year, but a noticeable one, no. But again, when I considered the people we were paying transitional cost share on, I was shocked at how many people are in the transition period yet. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is that the end of the year for FSA?
Yeah, so our current farm bill is through 2023, and that's why I say keep contacting your FSA office to see if we're going to start including those transitional producers in a program like this or create a whole new one in the new farm bill. We just don't know at this time, but hopefully by 2025, we'll have a full new farm bill and we can provide additional information on whether this program will continue to be available and if other organic programs will be coming out. With us being at the end of a farm bill, we can't promise anything. We don't know where funding is going to be allocated. I hope that we continue to provide this organic cost share program, but again, it's all up in the air with it being through the end of this fiscal year. Yep, and that's the table that I showed you here. This is what is outlined in our federal regulation right now.
And quite honest, I'm assuming, but with the top funding coming out, I would imagine that the farm bill should hopefully align with that, Right.
Mm-hmm. Additionally, it is a good thing to note that OCCSP, I said earlier that some states you can apply for this through state agencies who are enrolled to administer this program. The reason that is because the OCCSP is in an FSA program. It's a national organics program, and we administer it for them because we have the manpower to be able to do so. So even when we talk FSA funding, that may not be included in that set of rules that you see strictly with FSA. That first needs to be put in the NOP rules, and then that'll filter down.
Yeah,
I apologize.
I have a operation, and my opposition is based on Oregon. So I would fill out the paperwork through the Oregon, directly to the state rather than through the F. And so then when you use Iowa,
I know that it's the program
Before it went to NOP.
that was
Before, okay. Sure. That would be for my time though. So,
Just before my time.
do we know if there's any questions up there? How can we tell? I'm sorry.
Oh, no,
I don't want to ignore the people online.
Okay, sure. So let's see. So usually.
Incremental.
Yeah.
No
so
questions.
No
Okay,
questions.
perfect.
So we'll go ahead and start from this slide. Yeah, it's like.
Okay. So now we are going to go in and talk about the non-insured crop disaster assistance program. This program, again, may not fit into your operation, but we do see a large number of the producers participating in the NAP program who maintain an organic status. So I do want to make sure that I offer this to additional people. Could you please repeat questions given from, oh, yes, I apologize. I can't tell you how many we've had. One of the questions for OCCSP was, have we seen an uptick in people applying? And that is kind of, but not a huge percentage. We do see more and more people interested in our or in organic programs and the cost share that they can receive through FSA. Also, additional questions. What did you ask? I'm sorry. The Farm Bill. Wanted to make sure that funding was through 2023 per the Farm Bill, and as I said, yes, it is. And I think that covers everything. But if you have other questions, please just let me know. Okay. So as I said, NAP is one where it may not fit into everybody's presentation or everybody's operation that is here today, but it will fit into some people's operations because we do see these producers in NAP who maintain an organic status. And non-insurable crop disaster assistance is a mouthful. So as I said earlier, we're going to use our acronym, and that is NAP. NAP is so NAP is a program administered by the USDA Farm Service Agency, and it provides financial assistance to producers of non-insured crops to protect against natural disasters that result in lower yield or crop losses or prevents crops from being planted. This program can provide basic catastrophic coverage at 50% of a producer's expected production and 55% of the average market price of the crop. In addition to basic coverage, producers can also elect to obtain coverage at a higher level known as buy-up coverage. Buy-up coverage levels range from 50 to 65% of the production that can be elected, and this can be elected in 5% increments, and 100% of the average market price. To obtain coverage, a producer must elect their coverage levels by the application closing date. So basically what this slide is telling you is, first and foremost, you need to go and visit your federal crop insurance agent. If your federal crop insurance agent provides coverage on the crop and the intended use of the crop, then we are not allowed by federal regulation to provide assistance to you through the NAP policy. With that being said, there are some options where you would see somebody doubled up, and that's going to be in pilot programs. And then we also have some forage programs that allow you to double up NAP, and what they are offered through RMA. But in those situations, you can't receive both payments. So you're going to have to decide, who are you going to get payment through? Are you going to get payment through RMA, or are you going to get payment through us? Some people are going to say, well, we can always get full farm insurance through RMA. That's true. You can always get whole farm insurance through RMA. But the important thing to note on that is with NAP, we actually do break it down like federal crop insurance does, and we allow you to seek coverage crop by crop, and we don't require you to put all of your farming operation under a whole farm policy. Okay, so an eligible producer is a landowner, a tenant, or sharecropper who shares in the risk of producing an eligible crop and is entitled to an ownership share of the crop. Additionally, you need to make sure that if you're applying that you are averaging less than $900,000, and that's going to be certified on our adjusted gross income form. And producers will be familiar with that if you have participated in FSA programs in the past.
And then
So it was asked what's a non-insurable crop and what's the benefit of it going and not going through RMA, correct? Yeah, so we do not insure RMA coverable crops. So I can't insure corn or soybeans here in the state of Iowa because every county in the state of Iowa is offered insurance through federal crop insurance or risk management. Risk management looks over federal crop insurance. So you'll hear us talk about RMA, that's federal crop insurance. So an example of that I always like to share is apples, because here in the state of Iowa, RMA or federal crop insurance provides coverage in 3 counties. So there's 3 counties in the state of Iowa that cannot get our non-insured crop disaster assistance policy, but every other county in the state of Iowa only has the option, unless it's through whole farm protection that they get through RMA. Their only option on a crop by crop basis is through FSA. Other crops that you see covered through NAP are pumpkins, grapes, cabbage. We have quite a bit of cabbage. We have tomatoes. So a lot of our specialty crops. So you can't go get coverage from a federal crop insurance, but you can get, and that's why it's called non-insured, because it's non-insured through federal crop insurance.
So it kind of serves as a backup coverage for those specialty crop producers that cannot get coverage through the risk management.
Correct. It's kind of a catch-all. Anything that isn't caught by RMA is going to be caught. Yes, as long as it is listed in my next slide as an eligible crop. And we'll talk about that in a second. Organic no-till corn is not insurable. Could it be insured under NAP? I would have to work with the RMA and our local contacts that we have, but if it is non-insurable through RMA, yes, we could look at organic no-till corn as being covered through NAP. Does that answer your question, Marilyn? I'm going to say yes. I don't see another one coming. Okay. All right. So we went over this slide and then we talked about who is eligible. You have to have a risk in the crop and a share in it. And then you have to make less than $900,000. But let's talk about those eligible crops that we were just asking about. So who can seek coverage? And it's going to be somebody who's growing crops grown for food, crops planted and grown for livestock consumption, such as grain and forage crops, including native forage, crops grown for fiber, such as cotton and flax, except trees. So we do cover fruit and nut trees, but any tree for fiber use specifically, we're not going to cover that. Crops grown in a controlled environment, such as mushrooms and floriculture, specialty crops such as honey and maple sap, sea oats and seagrass. I don't think we're going to see a lot of that here in Iowa, but I'm constantly surprised at my job. Sweet sorghum and biomass sorghum, industrial crops, including crops used in manufacturing or growing as a feedstock for renewable biofuel, renewable electricity, or bio-based production, value loss crops such as aquaculture, Christmas trees, ginseng, ornamental nursery, and turf grass, and seed crops where the propagation stock is produced for sale as seed stock for other eligible NAP crop production. So another one that isn't specifically listed on here that is fairly new is hemp. And IDALS, I know you guys, I've worked with one of your coworkers on hemp producers and the licensing requirements. So I do just want to put a plug in because I have had quite a few people interested in coverage for their hemp. And if you are a hemp producer, a potential hemp producer who wants to seek coverage with FSA through our NAP program, please have your license ready. And then also know that prior to being able to collect coverage through NAP, you have to have a contract in place to already be able to sell that crop. That is a different policy than what we have for every other crop. All of our other crops, you have to have the ability and intent to harvest, market, and haul. With hemp, you have to already have it marketed. So a good thing to keep in mind as we move forward with more and more producers bringing hemp into their production. To be eligible for payment, a producer must have had a loss due to a natural disaster, including damaging weather such as drought, freeze, hail, excessive moisture, excessive wind, or hurricane. Also, we include adverse natural occurrences such as earthquakes or floods and conditions related to damaging weather or adverse natural occurrences such as excessive heat, plant disease, volcanic smog, or insect infestation. So we are not just a yield loss program. When you come in and you provide a notice of loss, just like you have to do with your federal crop insurance agent, you have to let us know what caused this loss, and it has to be due to one of these eligible events that we have listed on this slide. After you give me a notice of loss, I am then, well, I'm not going to, your county office is going to send out one of our loss adjusters who has received specific training for these specialty crops and reviewing them and getting an idea of, you know, what the loss was actually due to. So just be aware of the fact that it isn't just going to be a notice of loss that you provide after one of these disaster events. It's going to be a notice of loss followed by one of our representatives coming out and visiting your field to actually assess the damage. And it is important to know that we work very closely with Iowa State University on these specialty crops, and our loss adjusters do reach out to them often with some of these crops that aren't as common. And we provide pictures and scenarios and management practices of the producers to Iowa State if we ever question, you know, what was this loss due to. So we do always work in the best interest of our producers here in the state of Iowa, and Iowa State is a great resource for us. Olga?
Do you guys see a lot of claims when the derecho occurred a couple of years back?
So we had the question of, did we see a lot of claims for the derecho? And we, so in that area of the state, that's kind of central and eastern, we did see some, but that's not where our primary coverage actually lies in the state of Iowa. We see a lot of coverage for NAP just north of there and east of there. So while we did have claims, it wasn't one of our primary pockets that we provide coverage. So I wouldn't say a lot due to that specifically. A lot of our claims come from like a late freeze or an early frost. We see a lot of that. So for producers seeking coverage, a service fee is the lesser of $325 per crop or $825 per producer per administrative county, not to exceed a total of $1,950 per producer with farming interest in multiple counties. So every applicant is required to pay a service fee unless they can self-certify to being historically underserved on our FSA form CCC 860. I don't know if you guys keep track of mega rule changes or any federal regulation changes that occurred, but just on January 11th, we did have a mega rule change specifically for NAP that is going to be utilizing the CCC 860 form, which is the form you use to say if you're socially disadvantaged, limited resource, a veteran farmer or rancher, or beginning farmer or rancher. And these forms themselves are now going to serve as an application for coverage for basic coverage only. So we talked at the beginning of this set that we offer buy-up coverage if a somebody who can fall under one of those historically underserved producer categories, if they want buy-up coverage, you have to fill out the traditional application for coverage. But if you can certify to one of these and you want the basic coverage, you're going to automatically be enrolled, and we're going to waive the service fee. So next I want to talk about, in addition to the service fee, that premium fee if you do elect buy-up coverage, and producers who elect higher levels of coverage must also pay that fee. And for yield-based crops, premiums are calculated using this information that I've provided here. I'm not gonna read it out to you because every time I try and do that at a training, I trip over it, but you can see here that it's all gonna be based on your share of the crop, the number of acres that you're planting, the coverage level that you elect, and then the average market price that our state committee has established. It is important to know that our state committee reviews yields and prices for each of the crops that we make eligible here in the state of Iowa annually to establish those. So we'll use that price. And then there is a 5.25% premium fee that is included in all buy-up premiums. And then we also have our value loss crops that we do calculate a little bit differently. And that's just because coverage is provided a little bit differently. So for value loss crops, you're going to take the max dollar value selected by the producer. Then you're going to take that times the coverage level, and again, times that 5.25% premium fee. Value loss crops, those are going to be like our Christmas trees. Turf sod is another one that we cover here in the state of Iowa. And basically they're going to say, well, I can provide production showing that over the last several years, I have been able to produce $1 million worth of production. I want to insure myself at $275,000 worth of production, just so I know that if I have a total loss, I'm going to be covered $275,000. So we would take that $275,000 times whatever coverage level they elected, and then take it times that 5.25%. So that's how we have that. So how do we apply for this program? You are going to go to your local FSA office, and you are going to let them know the crop type, and the intended use that you wish to cover. And it is important to know that these need to be applied. You have to have that 471 on file in the office with the applicable service fee by the date of the application closing date for that crop. And you need to work with your local FSA office to determine your crop's specific application closing date, because those do vary. In the state of Iowa, we try to keep our perennial crops and our annual crops kind of on the same schedule, but we do have a few that kind of fall in different areas. Most of our fruit and nut trees are going to be November of the year previous to the year you're seeking coverage. Honey is going to be December, the year before you're seeking coverage. And then most of our crops like tomatoes, cabbage, and stuff like that, that's a March 15th deadline of the year you're seeking coverage to have those applications in the office. All right, so that is, I do want to say for NAP, that's like a 900-page handbook that we condensed down into 8 slides. So this was a very high-level overview and a lot of basic information. So please, 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 if you're interested or you think you have a crop that might be eligible, reach out to your local FSA office. And then also I have provided the website here, which is farmers.gov. That is always a great resource to producers to reach out to and get more information. I also have my contact information at the end of this PowerPoint presentation, and I am the specialist for NAP, and I'm happy to help you out if you have direct questions. If you know, your local FSA office maybe doesn't already provide this program to another producer, we can always get on and talk, you as a producer, myself, and the local FSA office that you're working with. Any questions on NAP? Nope. Okay. The last program that I'm going to go into specifics on is going to be our tree assistance program. Again, this program may not apply to everyone here today, but Iowa has a large number of organic fruit trees, grapes, and berry growers across the state that could benefit from this program. So I do want to touch on it today because a lot of people during the derecho were not aware of this program's availability. And I think that as much as we put out in Gov deliveries and we did outreach on this program, our producers were busy and trying to clean up messes and get things taken care of. So today and throughout other outreach over the last couple of years, I have been trying to make this more of a well-known program across the state of Iowa and make it available to not only organic producers, but all fruit and tree bush and vine growers. So the Tree Assistance Program provides financial assistance to eligible orchardists and nursery tree growers to replant or rehabilitate eligible trees, bushes, and vines lost by natural disaster. To qualify for TAP, eligible orchardists and nursery tree growers must have suffered a qualifying tree, bush, or vine loss in excess of 15% mortality for the stand, and then we adjust for the normal mortality. I think that state committee last year set normal mortality for trees at like 3%. So it was either 2 or 3%, I can't remember. So in total, a producer of a tree, bush, or vine, your loss has to be in excess of 17% or 18% before you be triggered to make a payment. And that has to be due to an eligible natural disaster. They must have owned the eligible trees, bushes, and vines when the natural disaster occurred. But eligible growers are not required to own the land in which owned eligible trees, bushes, and vines are planted, which means if you are renting ground and you have aronia berries or grapes or an apple orchard on it, you are eligible to participate in this program just like you are on rented ground on any other FSA programs. And they must replace eligible trees, bushes, and vines within 12 months from the date the TAP application is approved. So in federal regulation, it does say 12 months, but again, like with other programs that we offer, we do have extensions that you can request, and we have had a few of these TAP applications, and all of them that I have seen, we've had to request extensions. And it's been on orchard growers. And I don't know how much you guys work with orchardists and apple tree growers, but there can be sometimes a 3-year waiting period to actually get the tree that you're ordering, just because it's such a slow process to get that. So this has been made aware to the national office. They know that this is a slow process. So I'm hoping that we maybe see something a little bit different in our next farm bill, but I'm not gonna make any promises. So if you are an organic, for me, when I say grapes and aronia berries and apple trees and peach trees, that's because of what I see across the state. Any tree, bush, or vine grower, please, if you're interested and you suffer a loss due to an eligible disaster event, reach out. But those are what we've paid on in the past. And, we know that there is restrictions and that 12 months can be scary, but don't let that keep you from applying because we can request extensions. Eligible trees, bushes, and vines are those from which an annual crop is produced for commercial purposes. Nursery trees include ornamental fruit, nut, and Christmas trees, and produced for commercial sale. Trees used for pulp or timber are not eligible for TAP assistance. So any of those pulp trees that we talked about it with the NAP as well, we just don't cover any kind of pulp tree through the NAP program or the TAP program. So if that is something that you're interested in, because I had a producer in Northwest Iowa reach out to me about that, and I said, contact somebody, your congressional, let them know that this is something that you're interested in, that you are suffering losses. So we don't cover them now, but again, keep a lookout for anything in the future that we may provide as far as those types of crops. And again, I don't know, do you see a lot of blueberries, organic blueberries across the state? Only one. So I haven't seen anybody getting with blueberries that is certified for this. Is it in Eastern Iowa? Yeah, but I have heard of an Eastern Iowa producer who did suffer a loss due to the derecho. And, you know, just keep in mind, all those little bushes are available as well for this program. To be considered an eligible loss, a request death loss must first be sustained. A stand of eligible trees, bushes, or vines must have suffered more than 15%, or in Iowa, it's either that 17 or 18%, as we talked about, and it has to be due to a natural disaster. Mortality loss on a stand of eligible trees, bushes, or vines is based on each eligible disaster event, except for losses due to plant disease, and for plant disease, the time period as determined by the FSA for which the stand is infected. And then the loss must have not been preventable. So the way we determine that the tree is a complete loss is we're going to say that that tree isn't ever going to be marketable. It's not going to be able to produce anything marketable. So, and it needs to be quote unquote dead. So if rehabilitation is not going to fix it and it's going to die, then that is a dead tree and we pay to replace that. I quite honestly have never done rehabilitation. There are states around us who have done that. And I have talked to Dan Filius and Ajay and a few other folks at Iowa State, if you've worked with them in the past. And they have said if we ever run into that, they're more than happy to help us talk about rehabilitation and what is normal management on that. So that we do have a direction to go at FSA, Iowa FSA, if we do ever run into that. But our biggest was during the derecho when we saw applications for this. And that was just such a terrible disaster event that it was all deaths and they could not be rehabilitated. For tree, bush, or vine replacement, replanting, and or rehabilitation is the payment calculation is the lesser of the following. It's either going to be 65% of the actual cost of replanting in excess of 50% mortality, plus that 2 or 3% that state committee established. I'll have to look that up specifically. And where applicable, 50% of the actual cost of rehabilitation in excess of, again, 15%, and then that state committee established normal mortality, or the maximum eligible amount established for the practice by FSA. I don't know if any of you guys participate in our cost share programs for CRP, but they establish prices for CRP and what we will pay to cost share on those. It's no different for this program. The cost share numbers have been set at the national level, so that's not something that we can, it's not something that you can say, hey, can we talk about this? We have to follow those sheets that are provided to us. So while they may not reflect what we're currently seeing due to inflation, hopefully with the new farm bill, we will revisit those. And then I do want to touch on those historically underserved producers because they do get a pay increase of 75% of the actual cost of replanting in excess of 50% mortality. And then we'll adjust that. And where applicable, 75% of the actual cost of rehabilitation in excess of 15%. That 75% is, I believe, going to go up to 90%, if I remember right. And I don't think I put that in my slides. So Olga, I can provide that to you for you to post. But again, if you're socially disadvantaged or a limited resource beginning farmer or rancher or a veteran farmer or rancher, make sure that you're filling out that CCC 860 and certifying to which one of those you qualify for, and we can get you some additional payments and additional cost share. Yeah.
So there is an organic premium on organic apples, let's say, is there a premium on the FSA?
So she asked if there's since there's a premium on, specifically she said apples, there's typically a premium on any organic crop. Is there an additional bump in payment for that? For the tree assistance program, no, we don't look at organic and non-organic specifically, but for the NAP program that we talked about, the state committee establishes a, baseline price, and then we also establish an organic price. So if you are a certified organic producer who has applied for coverage through NAP, then you will see that typically the state of Iowa, we're looking at 145% increase from our traditional crops to our organic crops. So, yeah. So the following table provides the final dates to submit a TAP application and supporting documentation. So the date of loss was January 1st, 2019, and if it's in one of those subsequent years, the final date to submit an application for supporting documentation will be 60 calendar days after date of publication in the federal regulations, or within 90 calendar days of the disaster event or the date when the loss is apparent to the producer. So the derecho was pretty apparent right away that, wind came through, my trees are down, their whole root balls out, we're not replanting this. This program, we utilize loss adjusters. FSA sends out a loss adjuster because you called our office and said, hey, this derecho took my whole crop out, or, apple tree crop out. We sent them out, they took a look at it, they said yes. That producer has 90 days from the day of that event to have their full application turned into us. Important thing to know that to apply for this, you need to come into the office after to notify us of the loss. You can call us. That notice of loss we can take over the phone, email, you can stop in the office, but the actual applying for payment, we do a lot through email now. After COVID, our offices have learned to run via email, via mail, whatever is easiest for you guys, but we will need to have you provide some information. So stop in the office and they can walk you through that application process for TAP. So for this program, you can go to disaster.fsa.usda.gov for different additional information, or again, go ahead and visit your local FSA office. With all of the programs that I have talked about specifically today, I do always ask at these outreach events for our producers to provide a little grace to our county offices. These aren't our primary programs. These are for specialty crop growers, and we're typically seeing our row crop farmers of corn and soybeans. So you may be in a county office where you're going to be the first organic producer coming to apply for NAP or TAP or OCCSP. So allow them time to run these applications and become knowledgeable on it. We would prefer that you come in to the office one more time or provide us with an additional signature, then have you pulled for a spot check later on and find out that a mistake was made. And then we request liquidated damages and interest back because something happened wrong on the application. So please work with my county offices, be kind to them, and I promise we will get your applications done properly and get your payments out to you properly. Any questions on TAP? Okay. So I do, like I said at the beginning of the program, and if anybody has questions on any of the programs that I'm about to show you, I am not necessarily the program specialist on these programs here in the state of Iowa. However, I might know enough to be dangerous, and I can definitely get you in contact with the program specialists in our state office who do administer these. But don't ask too tough of questions. That's all I ask, because I'm probably not going to have the answer. So here you're going to see the additional programs that an organic producer can benefit from include, I'm going to move this so you guys can see. We have the Emergency Assistance for Livestock, Honeybee, and Farm Raised Fish Program, the Agricultural Risk Coverage and Price Loss Coverage Program, the Dairy Margin Coverage Program, the Emergency Relief Program. We're currently in phase 2. The Farm Storage Facility Loans, Livestock Forage Disaster Programs, Livestock Indemnity Programs, Marketing Assistance Loans, Pandemic Assistance Revenue Program with which just is a brand new program that rolled out with our ERP phase 2 or emergency relief program. Additionally, to the programs listed here, FSA does have a farm loan department. That is a completely separate department from the commodity side. So I do encourage you to reach out to your local FSA office and speak with a farm loan manager or a farm loan officer to see if you could benefit from any of the loans that they provide out of their area. And I think, Olga, you've worked with Brian Gosling in the past, and you have.
We have the recording already.
So there's a recording out there with Brian Gosling, who is our chief of farm loan, and he can provide way better information on any of that stuff than I can.
In our agenda today, we mentioned that we're talking more about farm storage facility, kind of keep us with more details on that.
Yes, of course. So Olga said that we talked about more information on the farm storage facility loans, and I just didn't know if I was going to be able to fit that in. But I will let you guys know that for the farm storage facility loan, an eligible producer is going to be somebody who has a risk in the crop and is producing the crop. So you have to be producing the crop that we're storing, and it needs to be a good example is going to be a grain bin. You have to prove that you have a need for a grain bin. And as long as you have the need, then we will go ahead and do the needs calculator in our office. We will require you to either get an irrevocable letter of credit from your local bank to secure us, or you can mortgage a property or something like that to, make sure FSA has to be secure in these programs because we are giving out taxpayer funds to put these facilities up. And you will then be able to get a loan on that structure. And you have to have, depending on the program that you're going into, either 15% down payment or 20% down payment. It all depends on security and structure and things like that. So we loan a lot on grain bins. We have loaned on meat storage, so cooler space. We have also had inquiries on like a cheese storage here in the state of Iowa. We loan on transportation of this, so a semi and hopper bottom trailer, those are going to be eligible because that is, you could technically store in that and you're hauling. But I do recommend Googling 1-FSFL. That is our handbook for that program, and it'll provide you additional information on how you become eligible, what actual equipment and vehicles are eligible under this, and all the ins and outs of the program. Or you can always reach out to your local FSA office.
What's the interest rate on that?
Oh, I can't tell you because I don't know the March rates yet, and I don't want to give you February's rate because there's no way you're going to be approved for it. And I guarantee it's going up. So okay. Does the farm raise fish also include shrimp? I have never had that question asked to me, but I am gonna write that down, and I'm gonna get your information from Olga, and I will reach out to you. Will you be able to provide me with email address? I would assume it would as well, but I hate to answer a question and then I'm wrong. I don't like to make myself a liar. More specifically, specific white shrimp, nothing pressing more, but okay. And I'm just going to follow up with another question to your question here. I'm assuming that this is for human consumption, but okay. I've heard where some people use like fish and fish byproducts as a fertilizer, so you can't ever be too careful. All right. Any other questions that you have for me?
Don't see it listed up there in your program, but I don't believe it was ERP, it might be whatever kind of place of what bus.
Yep, so that's our emergency relief program, ERP, that we're currently in phase 2 for.
Yeah, where they paid out the 75% of the first one, do you know anything about that?
The additional,
Yeah,
we just opened phase 2 and we have no idea. It probably won't be until after we close phase 2 till we'll know if they will have the funding to pay out that additional 25% on phase 1. Yeah, so I don't know if you'll get it or not. But we also have the PARP option that just the program assistance revenue program. Difference from ERP or ERP, as you called it, phase 1 to phase 2, ERP and PARP, so ERP and PARP, they are both revenue-based programs. So if you had a revenue loss from 2018 or 2019 going into program year 2020 or 2021, depends on the program, you'll have to look these up at your different options, then you could be eligible for a payment if you had a revenue loss. So look at your income in 2018 and 2019 and 2020 and 2021. There are fact sheets out there available on, I mean, you can just do a simple Google search of FSA fact sheets, and it's going to bring up a whole page of all of our fact sheets, and you can scroll through and look for the specific programs that you have. But because ERP and PARP are running consecutively, and because they are both revenue based, but with a little bit different policy and program guidelines, they have a really nice fact sheet that compares the two. So if you pull that up, I would encourage you to pull up the ERP fact sheet, the PARP fact sheet, and then the comparison fact sheet of those. So there'll be 3 total fact sheets that you can look into. All right. Any questions for me or Jamey before we throw it back over to Olga? Jamey, I hope you're ready to answer all the hard questions now. They've had time to marinate on your presentation. Oh, I do want to go to my last slide. If any of you guys have questions, please always feel free to reach out to me. We are here to help you guys at the state office. I know I don't get to see you face to face often, but we are always happy to answer your questions.
Thank you,
Thank
Amanda
you.
and Jamey. Thank you so much. And what I'm going to do, you guys, just logistical things. I'll be sharing the recording and a quick survey with everybody that RSVP to the meeting. So be sure to RSVP. You haven't done so already. And then also, since this came up during the presentation, I'll share with you guys this 2021 survey, so you guys can look at the what the survey is doing in the state of Iowa. So let me see if I can find it first. This is it right here. Okay. So I'm going to share this with you guys so you take a peek if you want to look at it. So this is specifically for the state of Iowa, the 2021 Certified Organic Survey. Okay. So Iowa ranked 6th in the nation for total number of certified organic farms with 799 farms, which represents 5% of the nation's total, according to USDA. There were 169,000 acres in Iowa that were organic certified. And then the average farm in Iowa, the average organic farm was 212 compared to 281 for the US. We are the largest producing state in the country for both organic corn and organic soybeans, and also organic hogs. This is some information here for you. And then also organic oats. So here is a map on, you know, the top states. So obviously California is number 1, Wisconsin's number 2, and then we have some states on the East Coast that are, you know, 3 to 5, and then Iowa is number 6. And then here are the operations. And I'm more than happy to share this survey with anyone that would like to take a peek at it further. But yeah, off the top, I don't remember exactly how many more operations there were, but it has increased from 2019 to 2021. Okay. Well, you guys, thank you everybody for joining us today. It was a little bit of a long, you know, it was a good, nice almost 3 hours. So you guys made it. Kudos to all of you. Kudos to all of you here too. And yeah, expect an email from me with survey link and recording. Thank you again for joining, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.